On this third Sunday of Advent, Mary's presence softens the season. She turns her attention towards God, choosing to dwell in human flesh. But Advent also invites us to look honestly at the family stories that we inherit. When I think about the stories I grew up with, I'm reminded that many of us inherit gaps or parts left out, softened, or simply not spoken aloud. In my own family, I heard about a family member that I had never met and how much he would have loved to see who I was becoming. I was told often about how he would have delighted in my interests, my curiosities and creativity, and the communities that I have grown to love and that have shaped me. Yet there were parts of his life that were kept quiet, out of care, caution, or simply because people didn't know how to talk about them. And as I've grown older, I've learned that some relationships in my family were far more complicated than as what I understood as a child. They carried the weight of social expectation, the need to survive, to make life within the limits of their own time. And that doesn't diminish my family's love, but it does deepen my appreciation for it. It helps me see our scriptures differently as well, like the stories of Naomi and Ruth. Their own lineages have both tenderness and complexity. And Advent invites us to honor the truth of these stories, trusting that God enters even the hidden, even the messy places, and brings dignity and grace to every part of histories. Naomi, Ruth, and Mary, they all show us God's faithfulness, but they also show the hard realities of survival, patriarchy, and power. Advent invites us to notice that God dwells in very real bodies, not perfect bodies, and not in simple stories. Real, complicated, inherited bodies. And Mary carries Jesus in a world shaped by power, patriarchy, and empire. Ruth survives through courage and risk, and Naomi grieves and rebuilds her life from the ground up. Their bodies hold joy and sorrow, hope and trauma, faith and fear all at once. These are the kind of bodies God enters. Bodies shaped by ancestry, bodies marked by struggle, bodies influenced by systems that we did not choose, and bodies that carry resilience, wounds, wisdom, and even possibility. And when we remember that Christ came through these stories, we remember that no body is outside of God's presence. God dwells in immigrant bodies, in curious bodies, in aging bodies, in disabled bodies, in queer and trans bodies, in bodies that carry grief, in bodies that are just learning to walk, in bodies that feel unsafe, and in bodies that show up anyway. Advent invites us to tell these stories truthfully, not to romanticize them and not to pretend that they're neat and tidy, but to honor the full truth of the people through whom God is revealed. And our joy is this, is that when we let go of fear of our neighbor that we do not yet know, or the neighbor who is different from us, we discover that God dwells in them as well. In the incarnation, God sanctifies every human body, messy, complex beloved, and calls us to build a world where all bodies can live with dignity, justice, and joy. The genealogy that I just got through. All of us, we did this together. And the epistle that Ainsley read remind us not to romanticize these stories. They push us to name the truth about motherhood, kinship, and servanthood. And they ask us to face the real realities of slavery and exploitation, the realities that shaped our scriptures and shape our churches. Not all women in these stories have mothered children, curious children, lovely children. And not all who did were recognized for their labor, for their care, or for their influence. In ancient Israel, motherhood was closely tied to survival, property, and social standing. Women who bore children were often valued mainly for continuing a family's line, while those who did not or could not were marginalized. And yet these lineages remind us that God works through all bodies, not only the socially sanctioned ones. And the women are more than their children or their mothering. Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, all enter the genealogy of David and of Jesus, not simply because of the children they bore, but because of the courage, resilience, and faithfulness that they embody. The Messiah comes through these messy and complex embodied lives, showing that God's incarnation sanctifies all human beings, regardless of status, fertility, or social expectations. And the same is true today. Not all women will mother, not all wish to, and not all mother in a way society expects. Those who do mother are far more than their caregiving. Every woman's life and work and presence carries value beyond roles and labels. And God's incarnation reminds us that the divine does dwell in all bodies, our ordinary and complex bodies. Just as the lineages of Tamar and Rahab, Ruth and Mary point to the Messiah, every human body today can reveal God's love, God's justice, and God's joy. Advent calls us to tell these truths to the next generation without whitewashing them. It calls us to prepare for a Messiah whose incarnation sanctifies every human body and leads us towards justice, towards dignity, and towards an abundant life of joy for all of us. Amen.